Good morning from New Zealand. Token Affairs, episode 5.
Here we are. We made episode 5, mate.
I know.
They're coming in so quick at the moment. I
Yeah.
haven't even got time to change my shirt. I think I was wearing this same shirt on the last episode.
I'm sure you washed it though.
I've got a couple of these ones, funnily enough.
Yeah. Well, leading up to your shirt, I think we should do an introduction for those who don't know us. I'm Bryan Ventura. I'm a partner at Hamilton Locke. I specialize in fintech and crypto law. I'm also vice chair of Blockchain New Zealand. To my right, or to your left, is Trevor. He is CEO and founder of Avatars Global and also executive director of Blockchain New Zealand.
Yes, and it's Thursday, the 7th of August here in New Zealand. So it's a beautiful day today. And Bryan and I are both poolside in Queenstown already, leading up to the big event that's happening in 1 week. A week from now, we will be neck deep in it. So next Tuesday, we officially kick off, but the crypto window will run from Wednesday, the 13th to the 14th next week. Down in Queenstown. There are still tickets being bought. I noticed a couple come through overnight, so there must still be tickets available. There can't be many left because I saw the numbers and I know we're very close. Maybe they've just left it open for any last minute people that want to get in there. So if you've got the time or you're down in the area and you want to learn more about what's going on in the blockchain and cryptocurrency scene in New Zealand, what's going on in the region as far away as APAC, we've got people coming in from all over the region and some of the biggest players in the space to share their insights, knowledge, and what's going on in the industry. So get into it, cryptowinter.nz.
Yep, and link is below. If you can find out the website link and the agenda, some big names. One of those big names is our guest today.
Yes, absolutely. One of the biggest names, in fact,
yes,
on the bill is one of our guests today. We're very, very fortunate. I think we'll look back at this moment, Bryan, when we've kicked off Token Affairs and the roster that we've managed to pull together. And then 6 months from now, we'll be scratching our heads going, who are we going to have on the show next? We've done all the big guys straight out of the gate.
Round 2. We'll need to do round 2 for some of them.
We'll be interviewing the window cleaner down at the New Zealand building who recently bought some Bitcoin. Absolutely. Big one today.
Yeah. I mean, he's CEO of Zodia Custody. They're a massive institutional custodian based in Australia. They've got global aspirations. And Ryan Hodges, the CEO, our guest, he'll be diving into his business, the importance of custody, particularly custody in TradeFi, looking to enter into the digital asset space. And so without further ado, let's bring on Ryan.
Let's bring on Ryan. Welcome, Ryan, to the show. How are you, mate? Good to see you.
Thank you. Very, very nice welcome. And I don't know about the big name, but thank you. It's very nice. It's really great to be here. Great to have the same background as you guys. We are poolside in New Zealand a week early, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But no, really pleased to be here. One thing I will say is I'm not quite CEO yet. I'm sure Julian in the UK, our head office, will be looking at this thinking Ryan's trying to take my job. Yes, Managing Director, CEO of Australia for Zodia Custody. But thank you.
When this episode goes viral and you've got millions of followers off the back of it, then you might be in a better bargaining position to take on Julian.
Absolutely. Let's go that way.
Love it. Australia in the next week. Look, mate. Pleasure to have you on the show. Know you're a very busy man. Your phone must be ringing off the hook. Your inbox must be flooding right now. We are very deep in a bull run. And this one, we were talking a little bit about this backstage. This one feels a little different to the last couple that I've been through. And this one feels like the big one to me. Institutional money flowing through, mainstream adoption happening, whether people are aware of it or not, they're going on chain. That was always kind of part of the plan, right? Was that, I remember in the early days, it was all about educating people. And Bryan was talking about his grandma asking about Bitcoin and the education journey that she'd have to go on in order to get some Bitcoin and put it into a cold wallet. But, with some of the activity that's happened, largely led by what's going on in the US, people are going on chain whether they like it or not. A lot of infrastructure is just moving onto these rails and these networks. So really excited to get into that with you today on the show, learn a little bit more about what Zodia Custody's role is in all of this. But the first question we like to ask all of our guests is, what was your red pill moment? What was the moment that drove you into this crazy crypto blockchain world?
Yeah, great question. So I think, like many people in this space, both, now or into the future or 5 years ago, the biggest thing for me was I was hearing, people talking about cryptocurrency and digital assets probably anywhere from 2016 through the 2018-19. And it wasn't until, a really good close friend of mine rang me and said, "Hey, I'm doing this. It's really exciting. You'd be interested in this and the applications in traditional finance." And then funnily enough, my dad rang me from New Zealand and said, "Hey, what's going on here? I would need to understand how this works." So that sort of kicked me into gear a little bit to spending time researching it, because prior to that, I'd really sort of pushed it aside to say, "Well, it's too risky for me. It's not what I want to do. I don't know enough about it," didn't do any research. But the more I then started to research and understand how that blockchain technology worked, the applications, I then sort of sparked into gear of doing more and more research. And at the time, I was leading a large team at Westpac in the public sector side, so transaction banking. And I could just start to see all those little things going, okay, well, this would be really great for atomic settlement in terms of solving that. This would be great in terms of liquidity in these markets. And all of those small things just sort of spurred me on to do more. And I was really lucky to have the chance to go and work with our group strategy team on producing papers with that in mind. That was probably 5 years ago now. But really thinking about how the bank would operate in the future, what our clients would need. It was a really great time. I learned a lot, certainly put a lot of things up that didn't go anywhere because it was a bank 5 years ago. And, we were probably ahead of our time in terms of thinking about the demand and how that worked in with brand strategy for a bank, but a really good experience for me. And I guess that sort of crystallized at the end of that time. This is the future of finance. That's where I want to move into. I'll start building my experience, education, knowledge of the industry, so that when the right time comes, I'm ready to go.
Wow! So 5 years ago, you've approached it from from a bank, from the inside of a bank.
Yes.
One of the big four. Were you the only guy in the room? Were you getting shut at morning tea breaks and stuff? That's the crypto guy. He's going to kill us all.
Not quite. Look, there was two really amazing people I worked with in group strategy that had, really deep experience in blockchain and digital assets and AI. And so there's a few of us sort of looking down that scope, and it was more around interacting with different areas of the bank, might be markets, talking about exchange, trade, and working out where we could actually add value. The biggest thing, and if you think about how a bank operates in a traditional strategy play for building models of products, every time it was going to fail. The payback, the challenge, the demand, you sort of find yourself trying to solve problems that either don't exist or people are okay with, And I think, if we look back 5 years ago, we were okay with sending money across the world and taking 7 days and 10 different people touching it. We are not today. And, anywhere in the world, people want that demand of quicker, better, faster, safer. And that's exactly where we're going now, I think, with this industry.
That's a good point. I mean, we all started 5 years. Trevor was 10 years. Wow. For me, it was 8 years. 9 years actually. And this space was really started by degens, cypherpunks, and they were trying to disrupt a $1 trillion financial system. And then now we're seeing TradeFi really come together and dance with the space. What kind of advantage do you have having come from such a big bank now into crypto?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I think the advantage I have, so my background is around 20 years in traditional finance or TradFi for the purists, if that makes sense to people. I think the advantage I have is I understand how banks operate, what's important to them. And I think I really respect how banks operate in this market. If you think about Australia specifically, through the GFC, the things that held tight were strong regulations, strong legislation as well, but also how the banks operated through that period. And I think a lot of it is around managing risk properly, looking at the profile of those banks and managing it through that time. And they did a fantastic job. So I sort of have the deepest respect for that side and how they operate. I do know now that banks are starting to, I'll say banks widely, not just in Australia, but widely across the globe, are starting to see,
Yeah, that's right.
Degradation of balance sheet around digital assets, so funds moving away from them. They are starting to see challenges from a liquidity standpoint into countries where they're trading. They're starting to ask questions of perhaps a SWIFT system, I should say, in terms of that timeline of payments. So they're asking the right questions now, and they are seeing value in what blockchain and digital asset technology can deliver for them as a bank, but also for their clients, importantly.
That's great insight.
Yeah, I came very much from the depths of the degen world. My introduction to blockchain and crypto couldn't be any more degen than what it was. I got dragged into it through all that dark web. Remember when we all started learning about the Tor network and this sort of seedy underbelly of the internet,
Silk Road,
and you could buy bombs and order hits and get any drugs you wanted and all the crazy things that the dark web promised. And I found myself, unable to resist the temptations of going down that rabbit hole. So I kind of discovered things back in, I think it was about 2012 actually, when all that was going down. So it's been a little while, but then it sort of went away. It slipped away from me because of all the reasons you've just outlined. Like none of it made a hell of a lot of sense. It all seemed like this weird little world. How could this stuff actually replace money or become valuable in a way that is meaningful for transferring wealth? But the more I kind of kept it sort of kept niggling at the back of my head, and I started looking at the technology and looking at what sits below that sort of upper layer, and what runs on blockchain itself and where the opportunities are. And I was in pharmaceuticals, oddly enough, when it really sunk in for me. And I thought health records, identity, all of these sorts of things make a lot more sense. And the way we buy real estate, all of these things that currently rely on a ledger, and it's typically a pen and paper ledger, or maybe it's some sort of Windows 95.
Yeah, maybe Excel.
Yeah. I mean, coming from the banking system, I'm a financial services lawyer. It's the most regulated business in the world. And you probably have an advantage as well, coming from that space into digital assets, to understand, where is digital asset regulation heading in Oz?
Yeah, good question. So I think yes. Back to the point, I think I do. Let's see how we go in terms of the regulatory side. I think two things happening here in Australia. We've got an industry, that is really strong in terms of people that operate in it. We've got great industry groups such as BlockchainNZ. We've got Decker, we've got Steve and Rochelle at Blockchain APAC, and we have a multitude of people driving the right conversations, doing the right things, trying to be the best actors to really shelve the bad actors. And I think the Australian government is open to that, is seeing that, and are trying to really now build, let's call it the rails, if you like, from a regulatory point of view of what we should be doing. So there's two things happening. The first is, where the Australian Federal Treasury is looking at, how do they build the right policies and legislation for us to operate as an industry? And then underneath that, ASIC is looking at the licensing side. So how should industry participants be licensed? What should they do? How should they be structured? And I guess, importantly, how does that fit in with some of the parameters we have today, like the Corporations Act and things like that? To me, going back to my earlier point, I Australia is heavily regulated for good reason. It was good to us through the GFC. I'm very patient, more than most, I think, in terms of the regulatory side. But I think what we're seeing now is, one, people are building and moving forward without that regulation and doing the right things, looking at AFSL side, looking at how they operate. And I think pleasingly as well, that's being recognised by, participants coming back in, like institutions. So the questions are, how are you regulated, how you operate, but not, hey, we're not going to do anything until the government says so, which I think is a really, really promising piece.
Yeah, it's a
It's a good answer.
It really is a wild time. We were talking a little bit backstage about how the world of TradFi and DeFi are coming together, and I've always felt like it's never going to be one or the other, right? Like the opportunities of DeFi are there, the legacy and infrastructure that really runs the entire planet of TradFi. It's, I don't want to use the cliche of too big to fail, but it's too well ingrained to be completely eliminated. And then there's cases where it makes sense, right? And one of those cases, which I'd kind of love to dive into, is around that safety and security of consumer, right? The TradFi really has done a great job over the last couple of hundred years, but certainly, in the modern times, in building in those safety checks, since Visa and MasterCard and some of those sort of SWIFT-based rails move money quickly and freely. But there's a lot of consumer protection around that. I know if my credit card gets pinged and somebody goes on a rampage and starts, buying Temu shit on my credit card, and I learned that in my life, then I can ring the bank and go, look, somebody's got my credit card. They're on a Temu shopping spree. They've spent $4.50 and bought half the store. Can you give me that money back? I'd love to learn a little bit more about like how custody comes into all of this. Like, what is the role of Zodia? What attracted you to work in that business? And maybe if we go right back to the roots for people who might be watching this stream that don't understand what custody is, what non-custodial versus custodial means, all of those sort of fundamentals. I'd love for you to take us on a little bit of a journey to the best of your ability. I know you haven't been in the role forever, mate, but give us the best, your best download on kind of the role of custody, if you like.
Yeah, sure. Let's do a whistle stop. So if we go back, to the experience I was telling you about at a bank before, one of the things that I really was passionate about, and I still am very passionate about, was custody. I think, the role of banks in Australia and the role of financial services in Australia is to keep, those core assets, their people's capital and cash really safe and secure. And we've done that very, very well over the years. And if you think about extending that across to digital assets, everyone who's bought some digital assets over the years, buys it on an exchange, nervously transfers it to, perhaps a cold wallet or a hot wallet, or they leave it on an exchange. That nervousness of moving funds and getting it wrong, or the nervousness of a failure and losing their money, is so great. And it has held people back from investing in cryptocurrency for a long time. What I think the next stage is to really drive the safety aspect. And I think, one of the biggest things I saw, which is a real eye-opener for me at the DECA conference recently, was the exposure that people had to FTX and they didn't even know about it. So holding funds on exchanges that were managing liquidity with FTX, and you had an unknown exposure. And so I think it's an educational side of educating people around, from a retail landscape, of how, to manage funds, how exchanges work, how wallets work, and that's on all of us in the industry. But then if we think about banks as well, I was really passionate about driving institutional adoption into banks to say, right, if a large corporate wants to add some Bitcoin to its balance sheet, how does it manage it? Do they invest in their own cold wallet technology, which is never going to happen probably? The cost is too great. Do they manage some, Trezor keys that sit on someone's desk or CFO's desk? Probably not a good way of doing it as well. So there's really not anything open to them to manage that exposure. So my view was we should do that at a bank, and we should do it from a retail landscape as well. Today this happens in a normal custody relationship where banks are custodians and trusted and managed trustee relationships as well. At Zodia, we're doing exactly the same thing. We're wanting to make it safe for people. We're wanting to make it safe for institutions. And I'll go back to the education piece. We really want to educate people on the safety side of it, because while some of those risks still exist in terms of transfers and things like that, excuse me, little pieces like whitelisting addresses and how we do make a check, it really removes more risk than people actually understand. And I think once you get into it and we go deep on technology, and I said I might bring my whiteboard to Queenstown next week, we'll see. But when you get into that side of it and start to actually unpack it and talk about air gaps and all those things that make it safer for clients, safer for institutions, it really brings it to the forefront that, it is a safer industry today. We have less volatility, we have greater players, and we have greater regulation coming across the globe. Just on the Zodia side for a moment, so our core mission is to enable institutions to safely and confidently embrace digital assets by providing bank-grade custody infrastructure. And it's probably more military-grade compliance and security, but we'll say bank-grade custody infrastructure for now. And how Zodia came about was Standard Chartered Bank, had a requirement from a client to provide that safety. And because there wasn't anyone providing that in the world at that time, Zodia Custody was born 5 years ago to really address that. Standard Chartered Bank and Northern Trust, the two founding partners, really wanted to bring institutional trust, rigor, and security to the digital asset ecosystem. What I would say is 5 years on, we've done that. We are just over 180 people across the globe. We operate in about 7 different markets. And we're evolving as the industry is. So we are looking at markets, regulatory environments, and progressing with each of those at the same time. And I think the biggest thing for us is that we believe, and I think we're hearing this more from our clients at the moment, is that I think core to digital assets is custody, the safety element, the education element, and making sure we do the right thing. And we call that crypto without compromise. But it's really something we believe in.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time in the crypto space. There's a lot of the kind of core degen belief that it's a better alternative to fiat. It should replace the monetary system as it stands. All of those sorts of decentralized or bust kind of attitudes that you come across, and then when the market goes on a bull run and trillions of dollars start flowing in because institutions now feel comfortable to come into the space and offer products and services to their customers, the same degens are all like, they're not happy about that this is going on, but they're happy because the Bitcoin price goes up, big green candles happen because of these things, and I think that there's a real kind of gap in that understanding that while it's the Wild West and decentralized and anything goes, that's great in theory and down with the man and all of those sorts of things, but without the man, without these institutions coming into the space, without the customers' focus and the security that something like a custody solution provides, we're never going to get there. We're never going to be and live the dream of decentralized money, programmable money, digital asset economies that can provide so much more opportunity for the average person. Without it's that mingling and that relationship that's fundamental to the success of it all. I kind of opened the podcast with that idea of, it's TradFi meets DeFi, and where they live harmoniously is where the main kind of the top of the bell curve is. And of course, there's going to be extremes on either end, right? You're going to have the crazy Wild West DeFi, decentralized exchanges, people doing weird and wonderful things out on the fringes, and then in the same way, you're going to have purely TradFi products and services, purely TradFi models that suit different investment cycles. People who have a low appetite for risk, or however they might be looking at investing and storing their money. So I think it's a bit of an uncomfortable time for the hardcore degens out there who are thinking that these institutions are coming in and messing up the space for us all. But I really think the end result is we end up with a better system for the average person. Like you were saying earlier, Ryan, we remove a lot of the middlemen that take 7 days to move money from one place to another, and all the tickets, all the people that are clipping the tickets along the way. We truly embrace a global 24/7 market, which is what crypto is, and that fiat never has been able to be. So there's a lot of real big benefits coming into all of this space as a result of bringing them together. So I'd love to get your take on, where do you think we're at now, and what does the next sort of couple of years look like? What's going on a little bit under the curtain at Zodia Custody when you guys sit around the board table and rub the crystal ball and look into the future and try and figure out where this is all headed? What does the next 12 months look like?
Yeah, I think, I think the biggest thing for us is we want to provide a platform that provides that safety and security. And so that platform starts with custody. So how do we custody digital assets and make it safe for people to transact? And on that platform now, excuse me, I've got a bit of a cough.
It always happens when you're live streaming something, right?
Yeah.
That when you're having an argument with your wife. I always seem to find that when I'm having sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. So going back to that, so the platform is the custodian side, but more and more now, our clients are wanting to use that safety to still transact. So we look at a few different pieces at Zodia where we say, right, we want to encourage vendors onto our platform to partner with us so that we can actually provide services to clients. So we call those venues, and venues could be an exchange, it could be a staking provider, it could be a fund. And what we're trying to do is allow our customers to interact with those vendors or venues with safety. And so a really good example of that is our interchange product, which allows our clients to interact with an exchange but actually not risk those digital assets until the actual exchange happens. And so, and similarly to with staking and yield positions, we're making it 100% safe. I should say 100% safe, but we're making it safe for people to operate with us. We're trying to reduce as much risk as possible.
99%.
Bryan, you didn't hear 100%. It never goes to 100%. But that's key, right? I think, going back to our conversation earlier before, if we can make it as safe as possible for people, reduce risk, and get people comfortable, that's where we're going in the future. That's the ultimate for us. It's the ultimate for the institutions that are our clients. And that's where we're going. So we want to build a platform that has the ability to interact with venues, with exchanges, funds, staking providers, etc. So clients feel that comfort and security and safety, that their funds or their digital assets are not exposed until they need to be.
It reminds me, those are good points, team. It reminds me of a dinner I had this week with my aunt and uncle. They're both over 60, and they're asking me, how can I buy Bitcoin? And I'm thinking, these are, well-off people. They're both doctors. They're probably the semi-institutional customer that will probably need a Zodia custody. And user experience has been the biggest barrier, I think, to really mainstream adoption of crypto. And I can see custody providers like Zodia Custody, wealth managers working together, who are working with people like my aunt and uncle to onboard them onto crypto.
I think the onboarding process is changing rapidly, right? And you can now create wallets with a Facebook account and things like that. So gone are the days where you'd have to watch half an hour worth of YouTube videos, some 12-year-old kid from Uzbekistan's teaching you how to set up a MetaMask or whatever it is. We've definitely moved on from that. And I think that, apart from the alarm bells that are ringing whenever somebody like Bryan says, my elderly aunt and uncle are looking at buying Bitcoin, that's usually a top signal for me. I usually straighten sell everything. But aside from that, I wanted to dive into a little bit around the stablecoin piece, because I think with custody comes stablecoins. I think, I sort of felt like stablecoins were just this annoying step, between me trading my crypto and me getting my gains or profits out of the system, and I had to use these weird things called stable coins. It didn't make any sense to me. Why would I need a digital asset or a digital currency that's the same as fiat? It's one-to-one backed. Doesn't make any sense. Now we're starting to understand those guys had the crystal ball in their boardroom 5 years ago, going, we're all going to need this, right? So tell me a little bit more about the role that sort of stable coins play in your world, Ryan, and how that's impacting what's going on at the moment for Zodia.
Yeah, good question. So I think, my view, and I take a bank view as well, just due to my background, and like you, Trevor, I, 3 years ago we're buying stable coins to transition into something else. But I think now the role of stable coins is much broader. Banks and institutions are looking at them because they solve many different requirements they have. I think on the the most basic fundamental is that they have an interoperability across multiple chains, across multiple different sectors, across multiple different things that people are trying to solve. Going back to the example about, liquidity into countries that, might have challenges with their current currency. That's one. I think, they are attractive to people wanting to dip their toe into the digital asset ecosystem because of the less volatility around the price. So most of them just bounce up and down on the dollar of the US dollar, where they're pegged, etc. And I think just that shows people that there is value in them long term. There's that interoperability that I said. The risk is lower, there's less volatility, and they can be used all across the world. And that 24/7 settlement, atomic settlement, is a fabulous piece.
Yeah. And the cost, right? Like the cost of taking cross borders 24/7 using stablecoin rails is a huge win for blockchain and crypto. I think that's probably what's underpinning everything right now that's going on, coming out of the US, coming out of the UAE, tokenizing real world assets and what's happening in that space, which is the big conversation in our world right now. The stable coins are kind of, they're the necessary piece to the whole puzzle that, when I first discovered them, they were just this annoying extra step that I needed to go to. And it was like, why can't I just go straight to Ethereum? Why can't I just go straight to Bitcoin? Why can't I just say, oh, look, I've made, $20 and I want to pull it out and buy an ice cream. Why can't I just pull that out? And I've got to go do all of these things and move it all over. So I think it's really interesting that stablecoins are having a moment. It seems like every dog wants to own a stablecoin now. What do you think happens there? Like, I kind of get stable coins at an institutional level, maybe even at a government level. But what do you make of all of these companies and different projects starting up just out of nowhere, and suddenly we've got a stable coin? And because it seems to be the flavor, maybe VCs are backing stable coins. If you pitch their stable coin, you get them in the bank. But what does it look like in your mind? And maybe, Bryan, you've got some thoughts on this as well. Where do we go when we've got 500,000 stable coins that we can pick from? I mean, is that really a world that we need to go to? Is that something that has any relevance in the global economy?
Yeah, I mean, 500,000 stable coins. I don't know how many actual coins we have at the moment, but there are many of them, and people have moved through those really quickly. Like, everyone's bought a coin at one stage, which actually, they believed in, but went south pretty quickly. I think stables, it'll be a race to people to get volume, and obviously Tether and Circle are already there.
That's right.
But I think locally, there's a real surgence in stable coins, and for good reason. They show value. I think they're important for our long-term perspective in terms of banks, trading, etc. I don't think we'll have 500,000. I think we'll have a few that are very valuable going forward with specific use cases and specific markets. But yeah, it's one to watch, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're kind of the pipes. They're the gas that fuels a lot of TradeFi institutional money coming into digital assets, stablecoins, and it seems like a bit of a gold rush. But the business model. I was a lawyer in New Zealand, and I helped set up New Zealand's first stablecoin. And the business model is funds under management. They want to have as much New Zealand dollar deposits in their bank account, earning interest. And so I think there'll be a gold rush, but then those who win market share, who have large funds under management, will probably win out. And then those without the funds under management will kind of die out. What do you think about real world assets in particular? And what do you think Zodia Custody's role is in tokenizing real world assets?
Yeah, look, I think if I'm honest, our role is not to tokenize those; it's to manage them when they are tokenized. So, what I do see, excuse me, I do see, a view, and I shared this before, that I think digital assets is the future of finance, and I think we'll reach a point. I apologize, sorry.
All right, mate.
Right, mate.
We'll reach a point, excuse me, where we will have most of the assets in the world tokenized. That's where we're heading. I don't have a timeline on that myself, but I think we're heading that way now. I think people can see the value in it. And it's more and more. People talk about when it will happen. It's happening now. Real estate, different funds, assets, all over the balance sheet. So it's not a matter of when, it's now, I think, is my view.
So stable coins, essentially like a managed fund, right?
Yes.
You've got the ability to that interoperability, which I think is one of the things that a lot of people have been trying to solve for the last couple of cycles. How do we move what value across all of these different chains? And stablecoins seem to have solved that. The US is now more or less pegging their entire foreign deficit, or the national debt, into stablecoin ownership, and effectively getting degens all over the world to fund the national debt. Is there a future where fiat becomes a thing of the past, where we look back at the good old days of fiat? Is it gone? Is this the rising tide that puts an end to? I think, Bryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a conversation, unvalidated, and I'm sure I'm going to cop it in the comments, that something like by 2029, New Zealand doesn't want to have any actual cash money in circulation anymore. That's some kind of time frame around that. So we don't want any cash in your pocket. I mean, the last time I carried cash around, I can't even remember. I think we've got stable coins holding value, almost acting like fiat on blockchain rails, for want of a better way of describing them. Does that mean that we don't need fiat anymore, and that the US dollar dies and it becomes USDC, USDT, USD, whatever it is?
You guys saying that to me or Bryan? I think my view is.
I'm trying to buy some time. I'm happy to have a crack.
Cover the logo on the shirt, mate, and say, give it to Ryan Hodges.
I think no. I think no, not immediately.
I think I think so. I think you're right in the sense that the Reserve Bank, it costs a lot of money to run a hard note system. They've got to move hard notes from their vault in Wellington all around New Zealand to different banks, deliver those hard notes and coins. So it's quite expensive, and there's less demand for it. You're right. I think there's still some barriers to really killing fiat currency, and it's the ability to pay your taxes in stable coins. I think if and when that happens, that'll be a massive dent. That'll put a massive dent on fiat currency use. And then also just more widespread adoption of stable coins just around the wider economy. Like, can I buy my milk using stable coins? Will Woolworths accept stable coins? If that happens, then I think those are probably two massive barriers to fiat currency dying.
Yeah, I wonder if Stripe have kind of in a way solved that, right? Like these major payment providers, these remittance services. You go to Woolworths and you can just use your card like you do already. You don't care. it's just I'm buying my milk. I've got my $2 or where are we? New Zealand, Auckland, 2025. I've got my $7 for a litre of milk. And I just tap and away I go. And I don't care what network it is. I've exchanged that value for that product. And that's essentially all I need to care about.
That's a good point.
So yeah, I've had this sort of growing fascination as I've watched stablecoins kind of really catch fire over the last couple of years, and then the institutions piling in as they kind of have their red pill moment where they go, oh shit, yeah, actually this works really a lot better, and it makes a lot more sense. I mean, when was it? 1970 something. We depegged from gold, so there's no longer any kind of underpinning value asset to get money anywhere. It's just an agreement, and then you get the US printing 3 times the national supply over the last 5 years since COVID, and but the US dollar value has remained stable. I mean, how the fuck does that work? I did economics at uni. By no means am I an expert in economic theory or any of that. But one assumes that basic supply and demand rules apply, but not in this case. I can supply the market as much as I want. Demand can stay the same, but my price doesn't change. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, right? So. I wonder if we're seeing the end, if fiat's end times are in play, and the degens all over the world are actually getting what they want, but not the way they wanted it, right? Like they're getting all of this digital money in a decentralized kind of format, but it's actually happening in the same way and just replacing the existing money system with a better way of doing it, but not in the vision and in the way they all thought it was going to happen, where it was down with the banks and down with Goldman Sachs and down with all of these major centralized value holders. The fiat system is largely hedged around the major interests of those legacy companies like the oil, military, you name them. But you could argue the same thing about crypto, right? Like it was all drug dealing and terrorism. I mean, all that stuff. There's all sorts of backgrounds.
We didn't do any of that.
But the day-to-day reality is, I get my milk, I tap the card. I don't really care. I just want my milk, and I've earned my hourly rate or my salary or whatever it is. And the way in which that happens anymore is becoming less and less relevant in my mind to the average consumer. And so, there's always ways of laundering money if it's fiat, and there'll always be ways of laundering money if it's digital, right? There's and every other part of the spectrum. But I wonder if, like Bryan says, this expensive process of having to mine raw materials, make money, continually reinvent it because it keeps getting counterfeited and is easy to hack. And so I have to keep changing it, and then I've got to ship it all over the place, and I've got to store it and all the rest of it. I think I wonder if that's all just going into the too hard basket, and my kids and your kids will visit the fiat, the Reserve Bank Mint, and talk about when that used to be a thing, when they used to print this thing called money. It's an interesting time.
I do think we'll get there eventually. I think the big thing at the moment, what I'm watching with interest, is the central banks across the world and their view on stablecoins, because to them, it really will upset how they run those central reserves, how fiat works, monetary policy. And I think, I think we'll see that play out in the next couple of months, but something to watch. And that's why I think it might be a little bit longer until we see reduction of fiat use. But also, I think to your other point, Trevor, the mass adoption of using cryptocurrency to buy everyday items is something 5 years ago, I was like, right, we're doing it tomorrow, but it's going to take some time. Until people
technology's there, mate. It's just all
10 years ago. Technology's there. It's happening today. People do it, and I think those maxis that we know, that they live by that. But I think we're still a wee way away yet of doing that. But when it does happen, I think in Australia and New Zealand, we are fierce digital adopters, of PayWave and technology like that.
Yep.
I would imagine when it's ready here, we will move en masse into that, and we'll leave fiat behind. And yes, we will go and visit the
the mints.
The mints and talk about when we had paper money and coins
and yards and stuff. Yeah,
100%.
What I love about this space though is I'm just looking at it from a meta right now, and you've got a former banker, you've got a Web3 founder, and you've got a lawyer all talking about something. And that's the beauty about digital assets. It spans, the entire spectrum.
Yeah, its relevance permeates everything. Much like we could all sit here and talk about the value of fiat currency to us in our various parts of the world, right?
Yeah.
I was just, as you were talking, Ryan, I was having a little moment. I thought, I remember when I was a kid and my grandma would tell me, always keep a bit of cash, just in case. All this digital stuff, if it goes down, you'll need to be able to go and buy stuff. And then, I was having a conversation with a mate of mine just a couple of days ago. We were talking about the end of, and that's where this sort of statistic around 2029 or whatever it is, where we'll no longer have cash and cash becomes a thing of the past. I wonder if as a grandfather, I'll be going, look, get yourself some Bitcoin and stick it on one of these things and, stash that under the mattress in case the world goes to shit. It's a wild time to be alive to think that the entire financial system that our grandparents, great-grandparents, and before understood it and used is fundamentally being rewritten right now, and we're going to live through and see it. I think we're in for some rough as guts couple of years. There's going to be a fair few heavy-duty bumps along the way. There's going to be a few casualties and battle scars, but I'm incredibly optimistic about the future. Apart from when I clicked a bad link and someone drained my wallet in my early days of crypto, I've had nothing but very positive experiences around being a part of that community, and I've made some pretty good bets along the way. Even in the meme coin sort of craze, I picked a couple of winners, and in terms of being an investment product, it hasn't been too bad for me. And so I'm by and large optimistic. I wonder how the culture of crypto is changing. We're talking about implementation of technology. We're talking about TradFi meets DeFi. We're talking about institutional adoption. But what about the culture of this wild and wonderful space that we're in? How do you think that is? Will we look back at it all and go, remember the Wild West when it was all crazy and we bought monkey pictures for hundreds of thousands of dollars, or do you think there's always going to be that sort of element of culture to crypto?
I think we're there now, aren't we? We're still, when we were talking earlier about coins we purchased, about, people that bought EFTs, I think we're still there now looking back, and we will continue to do that for a while. I think there's so much in front of us. It's crazy, but it's a fantastic time to be in this industry.
Yeah. For me, I'm excited about Zodia Custody's role in this space as well. Just thinking, we don't have crypto regulations in New Zealand. There's none in the pipeline. I know in Australia, there's nothing. There's some in the pipeline. There's some draft bills. But where I see custody, I think it's going to be central to everything. I think exchanges are probably going to need independent custodians for customer funds. And I can see Zodia Custody being a big player in that space. Is that something that you and the team 100%. Are foreseeing as well?
So the way, we look at the ASIC paper, I think it's Info 225, is we believe that there will be a requirement of separation of funds. And so that means, someone such as ourselves going in there and helping exchanges, helping fund managers to do that, and providing that, that safety, that, dare I say it again, crypto without compromise, doing the right thing and looking after those funds. And I think that's going to be essential moving forward, both in Australia and New Zealand, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I see Zodia Custody being kind of the glue, really, for
the glue. All right,
for the space. The glue. Yeah, you can run with it. I can see a massive use case for wealth managers, financial advisors who actually, I guarantee they have clients asking them, "Hey, should I buy Bitcoin?" And they're like, "Yeah, I'd love to service you, but I don't have a custodial solution yet."
I think so. And I think, one of the things we should sort of talk about is self-custody versus third party. And I think third party is where we're going to go in that separation of assets. It's the safety piece that I keep talking about.
Yeah. It's It's the
I agree.
the money under the mattress versus the money in the bank, right? And the way I see it is Zodia is like the safety net for a largely decentralized in terms of institutional landscape, right? There's no big four banks, there's no Goldman Sachs, there's none of that in this world. But then thankfully there are the Zodia custodies out there that are providing solutions for people and institutions to enable them to participate in this better system and reduce overall the risk of doing so. And I think that's a really, really important thing. And for all of the degens out there, you need to embrace this, guys, because they're bringing all of the institutions on board, and that will drive price up. And it will mean that you don't click a bad link and get done again, or an FTX doesn't happen again. Those are the sorts of things that we need to ensure if we are to have mainstream adoption and we are to have a better financial system globally. Companies like Zodia Custody are absolutely crucial to the story. So, and also incredibly thankful to have you as a sponsor at Crypto Winter for bringing Zodia Custody into New Zealand. I know that you're going to be incredibly well received. We don't have anyone like you in our country right now, so there's a big wide open gap for a custodial provider in our market. You talked a little earlier about the adoption rates or the way that we are sort of digital first. There's 1 million Kiwis-ish that own cryptocurrency. It's about 1/5 of the population and growing quickly. And so bringing some safety nets, we'll see that adoption continue to grow very well. I'm really excited to hear what you've got for us at Crypto Winter. Can you give us a little teaser, mate, or are we putting a blanket of silence over it and you have to buy your
like I said before, I think bringing my whiteboard along and through how the technology works. I was lucky enough to have a week and a bit in London recently, talking to all of the key people over at Zodia head office about how it works. And I came away from that even more enthused about what we're providing, how it works, the structure, the safety, and how we do things. So I won't bring a whiteboard, but I think one of the most important things is to detail how it works, to talk through the safety side, talk through what I think Zodia brings to the table, globally, and I think that's where I'll take it. And I want people to walk away confident about the blockchain industry is moving in the right direction, and hopefully that people feel educated about where we're heading as well, which is important for us both here in Australia and New Zealand.
Amazing. All right. Well,
yeah.
Me too. Thank you. Aren't we already there? Isn't the background?
Yeah, we're already. Yeah, we're just going to sit until everybody else gets here.
Yeah.
Until then.
Look, I think that's a great note to wrap it up on. Bryan, have you got any sort of closing thoughts, mate, for this one?
No, I think, the biggest thing for me over the next 12 months is, I've said it 1 million times, so I apologize, but education in the industry is really, really, really critical for everyone. I think legislation all around the globe is moving in different directions, all of it in the right direction at different paces, which I think is very, very good. Degens aside, I think your point is valid, Trevor. Legislation, regulation helps drive volume into the market, which is good for everyone, and safety as well. But that's the key for us. And the biggest thing I would encourage people to watch is that stablecoin central bank conversation, because I think that's critical in the next couple of weeks.
Nice.
Yep, I agree. And I think, from my view, I think, custody is going to be the bedrock for any kind of crypto regulation in New Zealand. It seems to be in Australia already. And I think Zodia Custody is going to play a key role in this space. So if you're interested to learn more, come to Crypto Winter, 13 and 14 August in Queenstown at the Rendezvous Hotel. Ryan Hodges will be speaking, and I'm sure we can grab a beer afterwards.
Sounds lovely. I'm there already.
Yeah. And I've said it a couple of times, and I'll say it again. I've never been in an industry where the key players in the industry are all, come on, regulate us, please. We want, we want to be regulated. Usually it's going the other way around.
So, we want it 100%, Trevor. Great point.
And look, Ryan, I wish you all the best when Westpac come knocking on your door, mate, and say, "Can you come and teach us about this thing?" And you can charge them an hour what you used to charge, they used to pay you a week to do that work for them. And that'll be, that vindicative moment when you all used to walk through the hallways quietly and silently and be the snub of the office jokes because you were the weird crypto dude. You can come back in and teach them all about this new financial system we're building. So that'll be
what I would say to that is people would be surprised at where the banks are up to. They are now embracing this full force, which is fantastic to see.
Yeah, I got a feeling they're not going to fuck around either, right? Like they're going to come at it hard and fast. I know that I'm having a lot of conversations with banks now. Whereas a year ago I couldn't even get them to respond to an email. Now they're reaching out to me, so I think it's going to come, and it's going to come thick and fast. It'll be very interesting to see what some of the plays are. And like you say, I think keep an eye on the stablecoin conversation. I think that's going to be a topic that continues to play out in the mainstream narrative in this space over the next 6 to 12 months, for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, we did it. We got to the end.
Thank
it was
you,
a great
session. I apologise for my
your voice made it through, mate. You can go and have a strepsils now.
It's all good, mate.
That's a unique New Zealand piece. I will go and do that. Thank you both, and thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom. We'll see you next
looking
week.
forward to seeing you, mate.
Always a pleasure, buddy. See you at the next one. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll catch you all on the next episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe.